The bullet that tore through Kade Franklin's shoulder on that blistering afternoon in Carson City, Nevada felt like liquid fire, but the only thought screaming through his mind as he hit the dusty street was whether the woman behind him had made it to safety. He had been watering his horse at the trough outside the Silver Dollar Saloon when he heard the commotion, three drunken ranch hands cornering a woman in a green calico dress, their intentions as clear as the desert sky above. Kade had barely registered his own movement before he stepped between them and her, his voice low and steady as he told them to move along. The tallest one, a man with tobacco-stained teeth and whiskey courage, had reached for his gun instead of listening to reason. The shot rang out before Kade could draw his own weapon, the impact spinning him sideways as crimson bloomed across his shirt. The woman screamed, but not in the helpless way he expected. Her voice carried fury and fear in equal measure as she caught him before he collapsed completely, her surprisingly strong arms guiding him down rather than letting him crash into the hardened earth. Through the haze of pain, Kade saw the marshal's deputies converging on the scene, the three ranch hands suddenly sobering as they realized what they had done. The woman's face swam above him, dark hair escaping from her pins, gray eyes wide with concern and determination. "Stay with me," she commanded, her voice brooking no argument. "You are not dying in this street after saving my life. Do you hear me?" Kade tried to respond, but the world tilted and darkened around the edges. He heard her calling for help, felt himself being lifted by multiple hands, and then everything faded to black, punctuated by bursts of searing pain. When consciousness returned in fragments, Kade found himself in an unfamiliar room with whitewashed walls and lace curtains filtering the afternoon sun. His shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat, bound tight with clean bandages that smelled of carbolic and something herbal he could not identify. A woman sat in a chair beside the bed, her head bent over some mending, dark hair now neatly pinned back to reveal a face that combined practical strength with unexpected beauty. She could not have been more than 23 or 24, close to his own 26 years. She looked up as his breathing changed, setting aside her work immediately. "You are awake. Thank God. You have been drifting in and out for 2 days." "Where am I?" Kade's voice came out as a rasp, his throat dry as the desert itself. "My home. Well, my boarding house, technically. I am Eleanor Morrison, the woman you saved, though I suspect you do not remember much of that day." She reached for a pitcher on the bedside table, pouring water into a tin cup. "Can you sit up a little?" Slowly. The effort of rising even a few inches sent fresh waves of pain through his shoulder, but Eleanor slipped an arm behind him with practiced efficiency, supporting him while he drank. The water tasted like heaven, cool and clean, and he drained the cup before speaking again. "The men who attacked you? In jail awaiting trial. The one who shot you is looking at attempted murder charges. The marshal has been by twice to check on you and get your statement, but I told him you needed to heal first." Eleanor eased him back down onto the pillows, her touch gentle but confident. "The doctor removed the bullet and says you will recover fully if the wound does not become infected, and you rest properly. So that is what you are going to do." "I should get back to my own place," Kade protested, though even as he said it, he knew he lacked the strength to stand, much less walk anywhere. "You should do no such thing. You have no fever yet, which is a good sign, but the next week is critical. Besides, this is payment of a debt. You took a bullet meant for me, Mr. Franklin. The least I can do is ensure you survive the experience." "How did you know my name?" "The marshal identified you. Apparently you have something of a reputation as an honest man who minds his own business and does not cause trouble. He seemed quite surprised you intervened at all." Eleanor returned to her chair, picking up her mending once more. "I was not surprised. There are still good men in this world, even if they are harder to find than they used to be." Over the following days, Kade learned that Eleanor Morrison ran her boarding house alone, a situation unusual enough to raise eyebrows in Carson City's more conservative circles, but accepted because she conducted herself with impeccable propriety and charged fair rates. She had come west 2 years ago from Pennsylvania after her parents died in a typhoid outbreak, using her small inheritance to purchase the property and make her own way. She was matter-of-fact about her circumstances, neither apologizing for her independence nor flaunting it. "I had a choice," she told him on the third day as she changed his bandages with steady hands that no longer made him wince. "I could stay in Philadelphia and become some distant cousin's unpaid servant or maiden aunt, or I could come west and build something of my own. The west seemed far more appealing. No other family? Kate asked, watching her work. The wound was healing cleanly, the flesh beginning to knit together properly. None that wanted me around without feeling obligated about it. That is worse than being alone, I think. Obligation without affection. Eleanor tied off the fresh bandage and met his eyes. What about you? You carry yourself like a man accustomed to solitude. My family is back in Texas, cattle ranch. I am the youngest of 4 sons, which means I was never going to inherit much of anything. Came to Nevada 3 years ago to work the silver mines, but that life did not suit me. Now I do odd jobs, ranch work, some freight hauling, enough to get by. Not married? The question was casual, but Kade noticed the faint color that rose in her cheeks as she asked it. Never found the right woman, or maybe never gave anyone the chance. Work kept me moving around too much to put down roots. He paused, then added, You? No, I received a proposal once, back in Philadelphia, from a shopkeeper's son. He was nice enough, but he wanted a wife who would be content staying home and having babies while he made all the decisions. I wanted more than that. I suppose that makes me selfish. I think that makes you honest. Too many people settle for less than they want and spend their whole lives regretting it. Eleanor looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Yes, exactly that. As Cade's strength returned, he began to observe the rhythms of Eleanor's household. She had 4 boarders currently, 3 older miners who worked the nearby claims, and a young clerk from the assay office. She cooked their meals, maintained their rooms, and managed the property with the efficiency of someone running a much larger operation. She rose before dawn to start the stove, and retired long after everyone else had gone to bed, always finding one more task that needed attention. You work too hard, Kade told her on the afternoon. He finally managed to sit up in a chair by the window, his arm still in a sling, but his strength slowly rebuilding. Says the man who took a bullet for a complete stranger. Eleanor was kneading bread dough at the kitchen table, her arms working the mass with rhythmic efficiency. Besides, the work needs doing. The boarding house does not run itself. You could hire help. Help costs money I would rather save. I have plans for this place. I want to expand, add more rooms, maybe buy the lot next door, and put up a proper dining hall. Carson City is growing, and people need places to stay. Good places, clean and well run. If I work hard now, I can build something that will support me for decades to come. The ambition in her voice sparked something in Cade's chest. He had spent 3 years drifting from job to job, never thinking much beyond the next paycheck. Eleanor Morrison thought in years, in decades, in the future she was constructing with her own hands. That is a fine dream, he said quietly. It is more than a dream. It is a plan. Dreams are what you wish for. Plans are what you make happen. Eleanor shaped the dough into loaves and set them aside to rise. What are your plans, Kade Franklin? No one had asked him that in years. I suppose I have not thought much about it. I just keep working, saving a bit here and there. Saving for what? I do not know. Something. Maybe my own place someday. A small ranch, nothing fancy. Enough land for horses and cattle, a decent house. He realized as he spoke that he had been carrying these ideas around without ever examining them properly. It sounds foolish when I say it out loud. It sounds lovely. So, why are you hauling freight instead of working toward it? Land costs money I do not have yet, and I suppose I was not in any hurry. No one waiting for me, nowhere I needed to be. Eleanor wiped her hands on her apron and came to sit in the other chair by the window. Outside, Carson City bustled with afternoon activity. Miners and merchants and families going about their business under the June sun. My father used to say that life is what happens while you are waiting for it to begin. He worked in the same factory for 30 years, always talking about what he would do when he retired, all the places he would see. Then the typhoid came, and he never got the chance. I decided I would not make that mistake. You are wise beyond your years, Eleanor Morrison. I am practical. There is a difference. But she smiled as she said it, and Kade found himself smiling back. By the end of the second week, Kade could move around the house with increasing ease, though Eleanor still fussed over him like a mother hen whenever he tried to do anything more strenuous than walking to the table for meals. He started making himself useful in small ways, mending a broken cabinet hinge, fixing the squeaky board on the front steps, replacing worn washers on the kitchen pump. The work felt good, purposeful in a way his usual jobs rarely did. The other boarders regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and approval. Old Pete, the senior miner, told him over supper that it was about time someone looked after Miss Morrison for a change, instead of the other way around. The comment made Eleanor blush and protest, but Kade saw the pleasure in her eyes at being appreciated. "You should not feel obligated to work just because you are staying here," Eleanor told him one evening, as they sat on the porch after the others had retired. The desert night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky like thrown diamonds. "You are still healing. I want to help. You took me in when you did not have to, nursed me back to health. The least I can do is earn my keep. You saved my life. We are well beyond keeping score." Kade studied her profile in the lamplight spilling from the window. What would have happened if I had not stepped in that day, with those men? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. "Nothing good. I was walking back from the general store, and they followed me. Started making comments, suggestions. When I ignored them, they got angrier. Cornered me in that alley. One of them grabbed my arm. Her hand moved unconsciously to her wrist, rubbing the spot. I have never felt so helpless in my life. Then you were there, and they had to deal with you instead of me. I am sorry you went through that. I am grateful you stopped it from becoming worse. But I am angry it happened at all. I run a respectable business. I dress modestly. I do not flirt or encourage attention. And yet, some men seem to think a woman alone is fair game for whatever they want to do to her." The bitterness in her voice cut deeper than any wound. "Do you know what the worst part is? Some people in town think I invited trouble by being unmarried and independent, as if I brought it on myself. That is not right. No, it is not. But it is the world we live in. Women are supposed to have fathers or husbands to protect them. If they do not, well, that is their own fault, is it not?" Eleanor stood abruptly, wrapping her arms around herself despite the warm evening. "I am sorry. I should not burden you with my frustrations." Kade rose too, his shoulder protesting only mildly now. "You are not a burden, Eleanor, and those people who blame you are fools. You have built something remarkable here through your own hard work and intelligence. Anyone who cannot see that is not worth your time." She turned to face him, tears shining in her eyes, though none fell. "You barely know me. Why do you have such faith in me?" "Because I have watched you these past 2 weeks. I have seen how you manage this house, how you treat your boarders with respect and kindness, how you plan for your future with clear eyes and determination. And because you could have left me bleeding in that street, called for someone else to handle it, but you did not. You took responsibility for a stranger's life because it was the right thing to do. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." The space between them felt charged somehow, heavy with unspoken things. Eleanor stepped closer, close enough that he could smell the lavender water she used, see the exact shade of gray in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving me, for seeing me, for being the kind of man who does both." "Eleanor," Kade reached out with his good hand, gently touching her cheek. She leaned into the contact, her eyes drifting closed. The moment stretched, fragile and perfect, until a crash from inside the house shattered it. They sprang apart as old Pete's voice called out an apology for knocking over the lamp in his room. Eleanor hurried inside to help, and Kade stayed on the porch, his heart hammering against his ribs in a way that had nothing to do with his injury. He was falling in love with Eleanor Morrison. The realization should have terrified him, but instead, it felt like coming home. Over the following days, Kade found excuses to spend more time with Eleanor, helping with tasks around the house, and engaging her in conversations that stretched long into the evenings. They talked about everything and nothing, discovering shared opinions on some subjects and friendly disagreements on others. Eleanor had strong views on women's suffrage, believing firmly that women deserved the right to vote and own property in their own names. Kade found himself agreeing, thinking of how his own mother had been reduced to begging his father for every penny she needed, despite working as hard as anyone on the ranch. "The laws are changing, slowly," Eleanor said, as they weeded the vegetable garden behind the house. "Nevada gave women the right to control their own earnings and property in divorce. It is a start." "You follow politics?" Kade asked, impressed. "I read the newspapers religiously. If I am going to build a business, I need to understand the forces that might help or hinder it. Congress, territorial laws, silver prices, railroad expansion, it all matters." Cade found himself telling her about his childhood in Texas, about the ranch life he had known and left behind. His oldest brother had inherited the spread when their father died 5 years ago, and while there was no animosity, Cade had felt like an extra rider, unnecessary and in the way. So he had taken his small inheritance and headed west in search of something he could not quite name. "Maybe you were searching for purpose," Eleanor suggested. "A place where you mattered. Maybe. Though I never thought about it that way. We often do not recognize what we are looking for until we find it." Their eyes met over the tomato plants, and Cade wondered if they were still talking about his move to Nevada or something else entirely. 3 weeks after the shooting, the marshal came by to let Cade know that all 3 men had been sentenced. The shooter received 5 years in the territorial prison, while his 2 companions got 6 months each for assault. It was less than Eleanor deserved in terms of justice, but more than many women received when men were the perpetrators. "How do you feel about it?" Cade asked her after the marshal left. Relieved it is over, frustrated it was not more, grateful it was not less. Eleanor poured them both coffee, sitting across from him at the kitchen table. "Mostly I feel grateful you were there that day. I try not to think about what the alternative would have been. You do not have to think about it. It did not happen, and those men are being punished. Because of you. Cade, you took a bullet for me. You could have died. I cannot help but feel like I owe you more than I can ever repay." "You do not owe me anything. I did what any decent person would do." "No, you did what a good man would do. There is a difference. Plenty of decent people would have looked the other way, not wanting to get involved. You stepped in without hesitation." Eleanor reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. "I need you to know how much that means to me. How much you mean to me." Cade turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. Her palm was calloused from work, her grip strong and sure. "These past 3 weeks with you have been the happiest I can remember in years. I know we met under terrible circumstances, but I cannot bring myself to regret it because it brought you into my life." "I feel the same way. Is that awful? To be glad for something that came from violence?" "I think it is human to find light in dark places. And Eleanor, you are the brightest light I have ever known." She drew in a shaky breath, tears threatening again. "I was not looking for this, for you. I had my plans all figured out. Do those plans have room for one more? They might, if that person is you." Cade stood, pulling her up with him, and wrapped his arms around her as well as his still healing shoulder would allow. Eleanor pressed her face against his chest, her arms tight around his waist. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the kitchen while the afternoon sun painted golden squares on the floor. When they finally pulled apart, Eleanor looked up at him with a mix of hope and fear. "What happens now? You are nearly healed. You will want to get back to your work, your life. My life is wherever you are. If you will have me, Eleanor, I want to stay. I want to help you build your dreams. I want to be part of your plans. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you are strong and brave and kind. I know you work harder than anyone I have ever met. I know you make me want to be a better man, to build something lasting instead of just drifting from job to job. I know that when I think about my future now, you are in it. That is enough for me. Is it enough for you?" Eleanor reached up, touching his face with trembling fingers. "Yes. God help me. Yes, it is enough." Cade leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She did not. Instead, she rose on her toes to meet him, and when their lips touched, it felt like a promise being sealed. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deeper as they both relaxed into it. Cade tasted salt from her tears and something sweet, maybe the honey she had added to her coffee. Her hand slid into his hair, and his good arm pulled her closer, and for that perfect moment, nothing else existed except the two of them, and this feeling building between them. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Eleanor laughed. "The boarders could have walked in. Let them. I want the whole world to know how I feel about you. Kade Franklin, you are going to ruin my reputation. Then I guess I will have to marry you and make an honest woman of you." The words hung in the air between them. Cade had not planned to propose, not yet. But now that he had said it, he knew it was absolutely what he wanted. Eleanor's eyes went wide. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. I love you, Eleanor Morrison. I want to spend my life building something with you, helping you achieve your dreams and maybe making a few of our own along the way. I do not have much to offer right now, beyond a strong back and a willing heart, but I promise you I will work every day to be worthy of you. Marry me. Yes. The word came out as a whisper, then louder. Yes, Kade, I will marry you. He kissed her again, lifting her off her feet despite his shoulder's protest, spinning her around the kitchen while she laughed and clung to him. When he set her down, they were both grinning like fools. We should do this properly, Eleanor said, trying to catch her breath. A courtship, a proper engagement. We have been living under the same roof for 3 weeks. I think we have courted more intensively than most people do in 6 months. I suppose that is true, but people will talk. People always talk. Let them. Unless you are worried about what they will say. No. I stopped worrying about gossip the day I bought this boarding house. But I want to do this right, Kade. I want a wedding, small but nice. I want to start our marriage with joy, not rumors. Then that is what we will do. Tell me what you need, and I will make it happen. They spent the evening making plans, sitting close together at the table with paper and pencil, sketching out a future that felt more real with every passing minute. Eleanor wanted to be married by the end of summer, giving them time to prepare properly, and for Kade to establish himself with steady work. He had saved nearly $300 from his various jobs, and Eleanor had her own savings from the boarding house. Together, they had enough to expand the property as she had planned, and maybe purchase a small piece of land outside town, where Kade could eventually start raising horses. We could have both, Eleanor said, her eyes bright with excitement. The boarding house for steady income, and the ranch for building something long-term. We would work together on both ventures. Partners in everything, Kade agreed, loving the sound of it. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity and happiness. Kade took on work with a local freight company, hauling supplies between Carson City and the mining camps in the surrounding hills. The work was hard but paid well, and he returned each evening to Eleanor's boarding house, to her smile and her cooking and the comfortable routine they were building together. The other boarders quickly figured out the nature of their relationship, and old Pete appointed himself Cade's unofficial advisor on marriage. The key is listening, Pete told him one evening. Women need to know you hear what they are saying, even when they are not saying it out loud. That sounds complicated, Kade said, though he appreciated the advice. It is, and it is not. Just pay attention. Notice when she is tired or worried or happy. Ask her about her day and actually listen to the answer. Remember the small things she mentions. It is not that hard once you make it a habit. Kade took the advice to heart, watching Eleanor with new intentness. He began to notice patterns: how she rubbed her lower back when she had been on her feet too long, how she bit her lip when she was worried about money, how her whole face lit up when she talked about her plans for the future. He started bringing her wildflowers from the hills when he came back from runs, just a handful of desert blooms to brighten her day. He took over the heavier chores without being asked, chopping wood and hauling water and repairing the roof where shingles had come loose. He made sure to tell her every day how beautiful she was, how much he loved her, how grateful he was that she had agreed to marry him. Eleanor, in turn, took care of him in ways both practical and tender. She packed his meals for the freight runs, adding little treats and notes that made him smile. She still fussed over his shoulder, making sure he was not overtaxing it before it fully healed. She talked to him about her plans and listened to his ideas, treating him as a true partner rather than just someone along for the ride. And in the quiet evenings when the boarders had retired and they had the porch to themselves, she would sit close to him and they would talk about everything and nothing until the stars wheeled overhead. They were married on a brilliant August morning in 1874, in the simple chapel on the edge of Carson City. Eleanor wore a dress of cream-colored silk that she had sewn herself, working on it in the evenings by lamplight. Kade bought a new suit, dark wool that was too hot for the Nevada summer, but made him feel properly dressed for the occasion. The ceremony was small, attended by the boarding house residents, a few of Eleanor's merchant friends, and the marshal who had overseen the case against her attackers. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher said, and Kade kissed his bride to the applause of their small gathering. The celebration afterward was held at the boarding house, with a meal Eleanor had prepared with help from the wives of her merchant friends. There was roast chicken and fresh bread, vegetables from the garden, and a cake that old Pete had somehow procured from the best bakery in town. They ate and drank and toasted the couple's health and happiness, and Cade felt something settle deep in his chest, a sense of belonging, of home, that he had not known since leaving Texas. When the guests finally departed and the house quieted, Cade carried Eleanor over the threshold of what was now officially their shared room. She laughed, protesting that his shoulder could not possibly be strong enough yet, but he managed it and set her down gently inside. "Mrs. Franklin," he said, testing out the name. "Mr. Franklin," she replied, her eyes sparkling. "That sounds good, does it not?" "It sounds perfect." Their wedding night was tender and awkward and wonderful, two people learning each other in new ways, navigating intimacy with care and growing confidence. Eleanor had been nervous, confessing that she had no experience and little practical knowledge beyond what she had gleaned from whispered conversations and reading between the lines of novels. Cade, whose own experience was limited to a brief encounter with the saloon girl years ago, felt equally uncertain. But they figured it out together, with patience and laughter and genuine affection, and when they finally fell asleep in each other's arms, both felt that they had crossed some important threshold together. The following months settled into a pattern that was both comfortable and exciting. Cade continued his freight work, while also taking on additional jobs repairing wagons and shoeing horses, skills he had learned on his father's ranch. Eleanor ran the boarding house with her usual efficiency, but now she had a partner to share both the work and the rewards. They saved aggressively, both working toward their shared goal of expansion. In October, they purchased the lot next to the boarding house and began planning the addition. Cade worked with a local carpenter to design a structure that would add 6 more rooms and a proper dining hall that could accommodate not just the boarding house residents, but also paying customers from town. It was an ambitious project that would take most of the winter to complete, but they threw themselves into it with enthusiasm. "This is what I dreamed of," Eleanor told him one evening as they reviewed the plans by lamplight. "Building something substantial, something that will last." "We are building it together," Cade reminded her. "That makes it even better." As winter settled over Carson City, bringing cold nights and occasional snow, they worked side by side on the construction project. Cade handled much of the physical labor, but Eleanor was there constantly, making decisions about layout and finishes, managing the budget, ensuring that every detail met her exacting standards. The boarding house residents watched the progress with interest, offering advice and occasional help. Old Pete, despite his advanced years, proved surprisingly handy with a hammer. "You two are going to make this place into something special," he told them one afternoon. "Mark my words, in 5 years, this will be the finest establishment in Carson City." By February of 1875, the addition was complete. The new dining hall gleamed with fresh paint and new furniture. The additional rooms were ready for guests, and Eleanor had already begun taking reservations. They hired a young woman named Sally to help with the increased workload, a recent widow who needed employment and proved herself capable and hardworking. The expanded boarding house opened for business on the 1st of March, and within a week, every room was occupied. Cade had been right about Carson City growing. The silver mines continued to produce, and people kept arriving in search of opportunity. Eleanor's establishment gained a reputation for cleanliness, good food, and fair dealing. They were not getting rich, but they were building something solid and respectable. In April, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. She told Cade one evening after supper, her voice trembling with a mixture of joy and trepidation. "Are you happy?" she asked, watching his face carefully. Cade pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Happy does not begin to cover it. A baby, Eleanor. Our baby. I am terrified. What if I cannot manage the boarding house and a child? What if something goes wrong? Then we will handle it together. You are the strongest person I know, and you are not doing this alone. I will be here every step of the way. We had so many plans, the ranch, the expansion. A baby changes everything. A baby makes everything better. Our plans do not disappear. They just adjust to include someone else, someone we made together out of love." Cade pulled back to look at her, wiping away the tears on her cheeks. "I love you, Eleanor, and I already love this baby. We are going to be fine." She nodded, allowing herself to believe it. "I love you too, so much." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through spring and into summer. Eleanor continued working, though Cade and Sally insisted she do less of the heavy labor. Old Pete and the other boarders treated her with extra gentleness, as if she might break, which amused her to no end. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she protested, but she secretly enjoyed being cared for. Kade found himself thinking more seriously about the ranch plan. He wanted their child to grow up with space to run, with animals to care for and land to explore. The boarding house was wonderful, but it was not the same as having a place entirely their own. He began looking at properties outside Carson City, riding out on his days off to survey what was available. In July, he founded 160 acres of high desert valley about 10 miles from town, with a creek running through it and enough grazing land to support horses and cattle. There was an old cabin on the property, weathered but structurally sound, and a barn that needed work but was salvageable. The price was reasonable, well within what they could afford, without depleting their savings entirely. He brought Eleanor out to see it on a Sunday afternoon, driving the wagon carefully over the rough road to spare her the worst bumps. When they crested the rise and the valley spread out before them, he heard her draw in a sharp breath. "Oh, Kade, it is beautiful." "You think so? I know the cabin needs work, and the barn is practically falling down, but the land is good. We could run horses here, build it up gradually, keep the boarding house for steady income while we establish the ranch." Eleanor climbed down from the wagon and walked to the edge of the rise, looking out over what could be their land. The summer grass was golden in the afternoon light, and the mountains rose purple in the distance. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. "How much?" she asked. When Kade told her, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to face him, her hand resting on the swell of her belly. "Let us buy it. We can afford it. And you are right. This would be a wonderful place for our child to grow up. We could still manage the boarding house, visit town regularly. Sally is capable of handling things when we are not there." "Are you sure? It is a big commitment." "I am sure. We have been talking about this since before we were married. It is time to stop talking and start doing." They purchased the property the following week, and Kade threw himself into making the cabin livable. He repaired the roof, replaced broken windows, and installed a proper stove. Eleanor, despite being 7 months pregnant, insisted on coming out regularly to clean and help plan how they would furnish it. They decided to keep the boarding house as their primary residence for now, using the ranch as a weekend retreat and gradually building it up to full operation. In November, Eleanor went into labor on a cold night when the first real snow of the season was falling. Kade fetched the midwife, a practical German woman named Mrs. Schmidt, and then spent the longest hours of his life pacing outside the bedroom while Eleanor labored. He could hear her occasional cries through the door, and each one felt like a knife in his chest. Old Pete kept him company, pouring whiskey that Kade barely tasted. "First one is always hardest," Pete said. "On the fathers, anyway. We are useless during the whole process." Just before dawn, Kade heard a new sound, a baby's cry, strong and lusty. He was on his feet before he realized he had moved, and moments later, Mrs. Schmidt opened the door. "You have a son. Mother and baby are both healthy." Kade rushed into the room to find Eleanor propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up at him with tired eyes full of wonder. "We have a boy. Kade, look at him." Kade approached the bed carefully, as if afraid he might wake from a dream. Eleanor pulled back the blanket to reveal a red, wrinkled face, eyes squeezed shut, tiny fists waving. He had a shock of dark hair and his mother's nose. "Can I hold him?" Kade asked, his voice rough with emotion. Eleanor carefully transferred the baby to his arms, showing him how to support the head. Kade looked down at his son and felt something inside him crack wide open, a love so fierce and immediate it nearly brought him to his knees. "Hello, little one. I am your father. I promise I am going to do my best by you." "We should name him," Eleanor said. "What do you think of Thomas?" "Thomas Franklin. It is perfect. Welcome to the world, Thomas." They spent the rest of the day in a haze of exhaustion and joy, taking turns holding their son, marveling at his tiny fingers and the way he rooted for Eleanor when she tried to nurse him. The boarding house residents tiptoed around, speaking in whispers, until Eleanor laughed and told them to stop being ridiculous. "He is going to have to get used to noise. This is a boarding house, not a monastery." Thomas proved to be a relatively easy baby, sleeping in decent stretches and nursing well. Eleanor recovered quickly, soon back to managing the boarding house with her usual efficiency, though now with a baby in a cradle beside her as she worked. Kade found himself doing things he never imagined, like changing diapers and walking the floor at night when Thomas was fussy. He was surprised to discover he did not mind any of it. Fatherhood suited him. As winter gave way to spring in 1876, they began spending more time at the ranch. Kade was building up the horse stock, starting with 3 good mares and a stallion he purchased from a rancher, downsizing his operation. He also bought a small herd of cattle, just 20 head to start, enough to see if the land would support them. It was hard work, splitting his time between the freight business, the ranch, and helping Eleanor with the boarding house. But it was satisfying in a way his previous jobs had never been. Thomas grew into a sturdy, happy child with his mother's gray eyes and his father's dark hair. By his first birthday, he was walking and getting into everything, requiring constant supervision. Eleanor hired another girl to help with the boarding house so she could spend more time at the ranch with Kade and Thomas. "This is working," she said one evening as they sat on the porch of the ranch cabin, watching the sun set over the mountains, while Thomas played with wooden blocks at their feet. "I never imagined I could have all of this a successful business, a beautiful home, a family." "You earned it," Kade told her. "Every bit of it. We earned it, together. That day you stepped in front of those men, you changed the entire course of my life, both our lives. I would do it again in a heartbeat, even knowing I was going to get shot. Because it brought me to you." Eleanor leaned against his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence as the sky blazed orange and pink and purple before fading to darkness. Inside, a lamp glowed warm in the window. Thomas babbled happily to himself, building towers and knocking them down. "I want more of this," Eleanor said quietly. "More children, more years together, more memories. Is that selfish?" "It is the opposite of selfish. It is choosing joy in life. I want it too." Their second child, a daughter, arrived in the spring of 1878. They named her Clara, and she had Eleanor's dark hair and Kade's green eyes. Where Thomas had been easy, Clara was demanding, colicky, and fussy for the first 3 months before finally settling into a better temperament. Eleanor joked that God was making sure they did not become overconfident as parents. The ranch continued to grow. Kade's horses gained a reputation for being well-trained and reliable, and he had started selling them to ranchers and the army post at Fort Churchill. The cattle herd had expanded to over 50 head. They had hired a ranch hand named Miguel, a quiet man in his 30s, who had grown up working cattle in California and proved invaluable in managing the stock. The boarding house, now under Sally's primary management with Eleanor's oversight, continued to thrive. They had expanded again in 1877, adding a separate bathhouse with real tubs and hot water, a luxury that attracted a better class of clientele. Eleanor's reputation for running a respectable, well-maintained establishment had spread throughout the territory. By 1880, 6 years after the shooting that had brought them together, Kade and Eleanor had built something remarkable. The ranch now encompassed 300 acres, with a new house they had built themselves to replace the old cabin, a proper 2-story home with 4 bedrooms, a parlor, and a kitchen, large enough for Eleanor to work comfortably. The boarding house in town was paid for in full and turning a reliable profit. They had money in the bank and plans for the future. Thomas was 5 now, already showing an interest in the horses and following his father everywhere around the ranch. Clara was 2, a whirlwind of energy and mischief who kept Eleanor constantly entertained. They had talked about more children, but decided to wait and see what the future brought. One evening in June, Kade found Eleanor standing on the porch of the ranch house, looking out over their land in the fading light. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How far we have come. How different things are from what I imagined 6 years ago. I was alone then, afraid of what was going to happen to me. And then you appeared, and everything changed. You saved me too, you know. I was drifting before I met you, just going through the motions. You gave me purpose, a reason to build something lasting." Eleanor turned in his arms to face him. At 29 now, she was even more beautiful than she had been at 23, her beauty deepened by experience and confidence. "Do you ever regret it? Taking that bullet, ending up tied to me in all this?" "Not for a single second. Best decision I ever made. Well, technically, I did not decide to get shot, but you know what I mean." She laughed, the sound he never tired of hearing. "You are ridiculous. I am in love. There is a difference." "Is there? Sometimes I am not sure." But she kissed him, and he kissed her back, and they stood there on the porch wrapped in each other as the stars began to emerge overhead. From inside, they heard Thomas calling that Clara had gotten into the sugar again, and Eleanor sighed. "I should go deal with that before she eats herself sick." "I will come with you. We are a team, remember?" "Always." They walked inside together, into the warm light and noise of their life, and Kade felt a contentment so deep it seemed to settle into his very bones. He had been shot protecting a woman he did not know, and she had nursed him back to health. What had begun in violence and chance had grown into love and family, and a future neither of them could have imagined. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and challenge. In 1882, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant again, and this time they welcomed twin boys they named Samuel and James. The twins were identical, causing endless confusion and delight in equal measure. With 4 children now, the ranch house was never quiet, filled with the sounds of laughter and arguments and the constant patter of small feet. Thomas, now 7, had become a serious, responsible boy who took his role as oldest sibling with great gravity. He helped Kade with the horses and was already talking about expanding the ranch when he grew up. Clara was a wild child at 4, fearless and adventurous, always climbing trees or riding horses that were too big for her. Eleanor swore she was going to give them heart attacks before she reached adulthood. The twins, at 2, were just beginning to develop distinct personalities, Samuel quiet and thoughtful, James outgoing and mischievous. The ranch had become one of the most successful operations in the region. Kade's horses were sought after throughout Nevada and into California, and the cattle herd now numbered in the hundreds. They had built a proper bunkhouse for the hands they employed, Miguel still, plus 3 others and a second barn to accommodate the growing stock. The boarding house continued to provide steady supplemental income, though Eleanor had stepped back from day-to-day management now that Sally had proven herself more than capable. In the spring of 1885, a drought hit the region hard, water became scarce, and the grass dried to nothing. Kade and his hands worked desperately to keep the stock alive, hauling water from the creek and driving the cattle to what little grazing remained. They lost some animals, but fewer than many of their neighbors. The experience taught them valuable lessons about water management, and Kade began planning a system of reservoirs and irrigation ditches for when they could afford it. Eleanor, meanwhile, had started writing. She had always kept detailed ledgers and accounts for the business, but during the long evenings while Kade was out checking the herds, she began putting down stories, her own experiences of coming west, observations about frontier life, thoughts on the role of women in building the new territories. To her surprise, a magazine editor in San Francisco expressed interest in publishing some of her pieces. Her first article, about running a boarding house as a single woman in Nevada, appeared in 1886 and caused quite a stir. "You are famous," Kade teased her, waving a copy of the magazine. "I am published. There is a difference. And I used a pseudonym, so I am hardly famous. Still, I am proud of you. You should keep writing." "I plan to. Someone needs to tell these stories, the truth of what it was really like for women out here. Not the romantic nonsense and dime novels, but the actual work and struggle and triumph." Over the next few years, Eleanor published regularly, building a small but devoted readership. She wrote about marriage and motherhood on the frontier, about the challenges of running a business, about the injustices women faced and the strength they showed in overcoming them. Some people in Carson City disapproved, thinking her too bold or outspoken, but others, particularly other women, wrote to thank her for giving voice to their experiences. The children grew. Thomas, at 12 in 1887, was already as tall as his mother and showing every sign of becoming a fine rancher. Clara, at 9, had settled down somewhat, but remained adventurous, now channeling her energy into helping Eleanor with the writing, learning to type on the new machine Kade had bought. The twins at 7 were inseparable, doing everything together and communicating in a way that sometimes seemed to bypass language entirely. In the fall of that year, Eleanor's parents' old friend from Philadelphia came to visit Mrs. Harrison, an elderly widow who had known Eleanor since childhood. She stayed at the ranch for 2 weeks, marveling at everything Eleanor and Kade had built. "Your parents would be so proud," Mrs. Harrison told Eleanor one afternoon as they sat in the parlor. "You have created such a remarkable life here." "I had help," Eleanor said, glancing at Kade, who was outside teaching Thomas how to break a new horse. "A partner who believed in me and worked beside me every step of the way. He is a good man. You can see it in how he looks at you, at the children, and the way you look at him. After 13 years of marriage, you still have that spark. It is rare. I fall in love with him more every day. Is that strange? Should not the excitement fade? Real love does not fade. It transforms, deepens. What you have is what everyone hopes for, and few achieve. Treasure it. Eleanor did treasure it, even through the difficult times. In 1888, Thomas was badly injured when a horse threw him, breaking his leg in 2 places. The recovery was long and painful, and for weeks Eleanor feared he would end up with a permanent limp. But Kade worked with him patiently, helping him rebuild his strength, and by spring, Thomas was walking normally again, though with a new respect for the power of horses. That same year, they faced another drought, worse than the one in 1885. This time, they were better prepared with their reservoir system, but it was still a struggle. Many of their neighbors sold out and left, unable to sustain their operations. Kade and Eleanor seriously discussed whether they should do the same, but in the end, they decided to hold on. "We have built too much to walk away now," Kade said. "We will get through this." "Together," Eleanor added, and they did. The drought broke in the fall, and the next few years were good ones. The ranch prospered, the children thrived, and Eleanor's writing career continued to grow. In 1890, a publisher in Boston approached her about putting together a collection of her essays into a book. She was both thrilled and terrified by the prospect. What if no one wants to read it? She worried. What if everyone does? Either way, you should do it. You have important things to say, Eleanor. Let them be heard. The book was published in 1891 under her own name, Eleanor Franklin, not the pseudonym she had been using. A Woman's West, True Stories from the Nevada Frontier received positive reviews in several major newspapers and sold steadily, if not spectacularly. Eleanor did not become rich from it, but she received letters from women all over the country, thanking her for telling their stories, for making them feel seen and heard. That meant more to her than any amount of money could have. As the century drew to a close, Kade and Eleanor found themselves in their 40s with grown and nearly grown children. Thomas was 18 in 1893, a young man now who had taken on more and more responsibility at the ranch. He talked about starting his own operation someday, maybe further north, and Kade encouraged him to pursue his dreams the same way Eleanor had encouraged Kade all those years ago. Clara at 15 was beautiful and headstrong, with no interest in the traditional domestic path many expected for young women. She wanted to go to college, to study literature and journalism like her mother. Eleanor and Kade supported her ambitions, setting aside money for her education, despite the raised eyebrows of some neighbors. The twins at 13 were finally beginning to differentiate more clearly. Samuel showed a talent for mathematics and business, already helping Eleanor manage the accounts for both the ranch and the boarding house. James had inherited his father's way with animals and could calm the most fractious horse with patience and quiet confidence. In 1895, on a warm June evening, Kade and Eleanor celebrated their 21st wedding anniversary with a party at the ranch. Friends and family gathered the children, now young adults, several of the ranch hands who had been with them for years. Sally from the boarding house with her husband and children, neighbors, and business associates. Old Pete, now in his 80s and mostly retired, made the trip out from town, joking that he had known they would make it work the moment he saw them together in that first week after the shooting. "You looked at her like she hung the moon," Pete told Kade, "and she looked at you like you were the answer to a prayer she had not known she was praying. I told myself, those two are going to build something special, and you did." As the party wound down and the guests began to depart, Kade and Eleanor found themselves alone on the porch, watching the sun set over land they had worked and loved for more than 2 decades. Eleanor's hair was streaked with gray now, and there were lines around Kade's eyes that had not been there when they met, but they still held hands like newlyweds. "Do you remember the day we met?" Eleanor asked. "Really met, I mean, not just the shooting. Every detail. You were so determined that I was going to survive, so fierce about it. I think I started falling in love with you right then. I was terrified. You were this stranger who had saved my life, and I felt responsible for you. I could not let you die. And then I got to know you, and I realized I did not want to let you go for entirely different reasons. Best thing that ever happened to me, getting shot that day." Kade grinned at her expression. "What? It is true. You are impossible. You love me anyway. I do. God help me, I really do." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky deepened from gold to purple to indigo, stars beginning to emerge one by one. From inside, they could hear the children, though they were hardly children anymore, cleaning up from the party, their voices raised in laughter over some joke. "We did well," Kade said quietly, "with everything. The ranch, the business, the kids. Our life together. We did well. We did better than well. We built something extraordinary out of a moment of violence and chance. We made meaning from chaos. That is no small thing. It was not chance, though, or not entirely. I chose to step in front of those men. You chose to take me in and care for me. Every day after that, we kept choosing each other. That is what made the difference." Eleanor rested her head on his shoulder, and Kade wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. They had been through droughts and injuries, financial stress, and the constant challenges of raising children and running multiple businesses. They had argued and made up, cried and laughed, weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical. Through it all, they had never stopped choosing each other. The years continued their steady march. Thomas did eventually start his own ranch further north near Reno, marrying a schoolteacher named Anne and starting a family of his own. Clara attended the University of California in Berkeley, studying journalism, and later becoming a reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle. The twins went different directions. Samuel stayed to help run the family ranch and boarding house operations, while James headed to Montana to work with cattle on the open range. Kade and Eleanor gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations, hiring more help, and giving themselves time to simply enjoy what they had built. Eleanor continued writing, publishing a second book in 1902 that was even more successful than the first. Kade bred horses and mentored young ranchers, passing on the knowledge he had accumulated over decades. They traveled some, taking a trip to San Francisco to visit Clara, another to Texas, so Kade could see his brother's family on the old ranch where he had grown up. But they always returned to Nevada, to the ranch house they had built together, to the land they loved. In 1905, they became grandparents when Thomas and Anne had a son. More grandchildren followed in the subsequent years, and Kade and Eleanor found new joy in being able to spoil and enjoy children without the full-time responsibility of raising them. On a clear autumn day in 1910, 36 years after the shooting that had brought them together, Kade and Eleanor sat on their porch as they had countless times before. They were both in their early 60s now, still healthy and active, but feeling their age in various aches and the occasional need for spectacles. "I have been thinking," Eleanor said, setting down the book she had been reading. "About what? About how different things could have been. If you had not been at that saloon that day, if you had decided not to get involved, if those men had been better shots and killed you, if I had left you to someone else's care. So many tiny moments that could have changed everything. But they did not. We are here, together, after all these years. That has to mean something. It means we were lucky, but it also means we worked hard and made good choices and loved each other well. I think it means both." Kade reached over and took her hand, the gesture as natural as breathing after all this time. "I would do it all again, every hard day, every struggle, every moment of doubt. All of it, if it meant ending up here with you. Me too. You are the love of my life, Kade Franklin. You always will be. And you are mine. From the moment I saw you trying to save my life, right up to this moment, right now. You have been the center of everything good in my world." They sat holding hands as the sun descended toward the horizon, painting the Nevada landscape in shades of gold and amber. The house behind them was filled with memories, children learning to walk. Christmas mornings, sick nights and celebrations, quiet moments and loud ones, the accumulated weight of a life well lived together. The ranch spread out before them, a testament to what two people could build when they combined love with labor, dreams with determination. The boarding house in town continued to thrive under Samuel's management. Their children had grown into good, capable adults with lives of their own. They had grandchildren who would carry forward the values and work ethic they had tried to instill. It was, Kade thought, more than he had ever imagined possible on that day in 1874, when he had stepped between Eleanor and danger without thinking, acting on instinct and the fundamental belief that protecting the vulnerable was simply what good men did. He had taken a bullet and gained a world. Eleanor must have been thinking along similar lines because she squeezed his hand and said, "Thank you." For what? for being brave that day, for surviving, for loving me the way you do, for building this life with me, for all of it. The thanks go both ways. You saved my life just as surely as I saved yours. Maybe more so. You gave me a reason to live, a purpose beyond just getting by day to day. You made me want to be better, do more, build something lasting. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. As darkness fell and the stars emerged in their familiar patterns overhead, Kade and Eleanor remained on the porch, unwilling to break the spell of the moment. They had been given something precious and rare, a love that had endured through decades, growing stronger rather than weaker with the passage of time. It was not a fairy tale romance of effortless perfection, but something better, a real partnership forged in trust and maintained through constant choice and commitment. Eventually, the evening chill drove them inside, where a fire crackled in the hearth and lamplight cast warm pools of gold across the worn floorboards. They had dinner together at the table Kade had built 20 years ago, talking about their plans for the next day, the letter Clara had sent from San Francisco, the news that Thomas's wife was expecting another child. When they finally retired to bed, they lay in each other's arms in the darkness, comfortable and content. "I love you," Eleanor whispered. "I love you too. Sleep well." "Always do when I am with you." They drifted off together, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built a life neither could have imagined alone. The story that had begun with violence had transformed into one of love and partnership and family, proof that sometimes the best things emerge from the darkest moments, that courage and compassion can change everything, that choosing to act when it matters can alter the course of multiple lives in ways both profound and lasting. The Wild West was never truly wild, not in the way the dime novels portrayed it. It was hard and unforgiving, yes, but it was also a place where people like Kade and Eleanor could create something new, unburdened by the rigid structures of Eastern society. They had taken their chance and made the most of it, building not just a successful ranch and business, but a genuine partnership based on mutual respect and deep love. In the years that followed, they would face more challenges: illness, economic downturns, the changing world of the early 20th century. But they would face them together, as they had always done, drawing strength from each other and the foundation they had built. Their children would tell their grandchildren the story of how grandmother and grandfather met, how a single act of courage had led to a love story that spanned decades, how two people had transformed a moment of violence into a lifetime of joy. And on quiet evenings, when the work was done and the desert spread out peaceful under the stars, Kade and Eleanor would sit on their porch and hold hands and remember how it all began with a gunshot, a choice, and the willingness to take a chance on a stranger who would become the center of each other's world. Their love story was not extraordinary because it was easy or perfect. It was extraordinary because it was real, built day by day through ordinary acts of kindness and commitment, through showing up for each other again and again, through choosing partnership over independence, through believing that together they could accomplish more than either could alone. That was the true magic of it, not destiny or fate, but the conscious decision to build something beautiful out of the raw materials of circumstance and chance. As the new century progressed and Carson City grew from a rough frontier town into a proper city, the Franklin Ranch remained a constant, a reminder of what the best of the Old West had been. Not lawlessness and violence, but determination and community, and the willingness to work hard for a better future. Kade and Eleanor became respected elders, sought out for advice and wisdom, their story inspiring younger couples who were just beginning their own journeys. They lived to see automobiles replace horses on many roads, electricity come to their area, the world transform in ways they could scarcely have imagined in 1874. Through it all, their love remained the constant, the anchor that kept them grounded even as everything around them changed. They weathered losses, friends who passed, economic changes that challenged their business model, the inevitable difficulties of aging. But they never lost sight of what mattered most: each other, their family, the legacy they were creating together. In their final years, when age had slowed them both, and they spent most days on their beloved porch watching the world go by, they would often revisit that first day, examining it from every angle like a jewel held up to the light. "Do you think you would have married eventually if we had not met?" Eleanor asked one afternoon. Kade considered it seriously. "Maybe, but it would not have been like this. I would have settled for less, probably, found someone adequate, and lived a decent but unremarkable life. You showed me what marriage could be at its best, a true partnership where both people make each other better. I know I would never have married without you. I had convinced myself I did not need anyone. That independence was enough. You taught me that having a partner does not mean losing yourself. It means gaining someone who helps you become more fully who you are meant to be. Those conversations, gentle and reflective, filled their later years with meaning. They had lived a great love story, not because it was dramatic or fraught with obstacles, but because it was genuine and lasting. The shooting that brought them together was the beginning, but everything that came after the daily choices, the shared work, the commitment through hard times, and good, that was the real story. When Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep at 78, Kade was holding her hand, as he had been for nearly 50 years of marriage. He mourned her deeply, but he also felt gratitude for the extraordinary life they had shared. She had saved him in every way a person could be saved, and he liked to think he had done the same for her. Kade lived another 3 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them products of that single moment of courage in the Carson City in 1874. When his time came, he went peacefully at the ranch he and Eleanor had built, in the bed they had shared for decades, dreaming of gray eyes and dark hair, and a voice saying, "Stay with me." Their story lived on in the family they had created, in the businesses that continued to operate, in Eleanor's books that were rediscovered by new generations of readers, in the lives they had touched through simple acts of kindness and integrity. The Franklin Ranch remained in the family for generations, a testament to what two people could build when they combined love with vision and hard work. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the desert wind whispered through the valley and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, people swore they could feel the presence of that love still lingering. A reminder that the best things in life often come from the simplest acts of courage, that taking a stand for what is right can change everything, and that true love, when nurtured and valued, can indeed last forever. The story of the cowboy who was shot protecting a woman he did not know, and how she nursed him back to health and they fell in love, became legend in Carson City and beyond. But for Kade and Eleanor, it was never a legend, it was simply their life, their love, their truth. They had been given an extraordinary gift in finding each other, and they had honored that gift by building something beautiful that would outlast them both. That was their legacy. Not just the land or the business or the children, but the example of what love looked like when it was real and lasting and true. And that legacy would endure long after they were gone, inspiring others to take chances, to choose courage, to believe that love could transform everything.